Hi, everybody. Welcome to Something New is Possible. And this week I'm here with Dr. Michele Rice-Kirkwood. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Barbara. Happy to be here.
It's awesome to have you. So I'm going to read your bio and then we're going to dive in. So Dr. Michele Rice-Kirkwood is a strategic business advisor and certified exit planning advisor who helps business owners get clear, build real value, and create options to scale, step back, or exit on their terms. With 38 years in the McDonald's system, including 24 as a multi unit franchise owner, navigating the realities of a family business, she brings straight talk, real world experience, and a deep understanding of what it takes to build a business that works for you. Having faced her own business crossroads, Michelle now helps others see that something new is possible. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Barbara.
So it's awesome to have you. We've known each other for a really long time. And you gave me permission to say you came to me when you were actually part of, or I want to say, manage that family business within the McDonald's system.
Right.
So, and that's a long time ago. So, what are you up to now? Why don't you tell our viewers, listeners, what you're up to now?
So now I sold my business in a couple years ago in 2024, and now I am working with business owners as a strategic business advisor to really just look at their business and see how they can grow value, but also looking at the long term. You know, how do you want to exit? What type of life do you want to create for yourself? And being able to have options on how you exit. So when I exited, my options were limited because I ran into some issues and I had to make a decision. And so I didn't have a lot of options. And so I'm very passionate about not waiting till something happens, but having a plan on how you desire to live your life and exit on your terms.
Let's talk a little bit about that. You know, the fact that you didn't have options. What was it like for you to all of a sudden be faced with, I don't have options. I need to, I'm kind of forced to deal with it in this way. And you can tell as much about the story as you want, for those listeners who may not be aware of it. But talk a little bit about that if you would.
Okay, so as I said, well, you mentioned in my bio, I was part of a family business. I had been in the McDonald's system since I was 15. So when I exited, total of 38 years.
Wow.
And I became a franchisee myself. I was a second generation franchisee in 2003. So that's around the time that we met. I had just went into business for myself, and I came to you for coaching. So throughout the years, we were able to build, grow, and scale. And my father ended up retiring. My sister, at one point, who was my partner, she ended up exiting, and then I was a solo owner. Well, toward the latter part of my career as a franchisee, I ran into some litigation. So there was a civil lawsuit against my company for something that one of my employees had done. And it was a pretty nasty lawsuit. It dragged out for 3 years. And I was basically, in, I would say, arguing, fussing, fighting it out, with different parties as part of this litigation. And so I had to make some decisions. So either I could continue fighting, we'd probably still be fighting about it, and dragging things out and spending money on attorneys and all these other things, or I could decide to sell, you know.
Mm.
And it was a tough decision because, well, I decided to sell because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life or any more years of my life in this constant state of stress and the unknown and all the things that come with that. And so I decided to make the decision to sell the business, right? And that came with some, strategies and recommendations by my attorneys, which were difficult choices.
Mm.
But I just decided to follow what I felt internally and make that decision. Now, I had no plans of what I was going to do post, post sale or whatnot, but I felt it was the best decision based on the limited options that I had. And I also knew that it was going to impact a lot of people. So
Yeah.
my family, for one, I had my daughter and nephew and some other family members that were still involved in our family business, but also my employees who had worked for me for 20 plus years, and they were family. So these were going to be some impactful decisions, but I just felt it was best. And so I sold. So it was difficult. It was post sale. I felt a lot of grief,
Mm,
right? Because it was
mm.
a loss. It was a huge loss, and I had no idea how deep that loss would feel, right? And so I really went through the next year and a half just really trying to discover who I was now, right? So, because so much of my life had been tied into, oh, I'm a McDonald's franchisee. This is what I do. So I tied who I was to what I was doing. So then when I didn't have that anymore, it really was a struggle of who really are you?
Mhm.
And so what I did was just started trying different things after I got out of feeling pity for myself, right? Because I did go through that stage where I felt sorry for myself. Why did this happen to me? This is not right. I went through all those things. But one thing I do know is that when things happen, they happen for a reason,
Right.
and we may
Yeah.
not know what they are, right? But I knew that if it happened for a reason. And so from there, I just,
You picked yourself back up and, just moved on.
Let's take a quick break. I want to remind you that if you're interested in learning more about neuro emotional coaching or kinesiology, if you would like to have a taste, find out what it could do for you or your business, your family, please look at the show notes. There's a link for a 30-minute free introductory meeting, and we can explore it. You can look at what is holding you back, what are your dreams, what is it that you always wanted to achieve. Don't be shy, sign up. Now, let's get back to the show.
So, you had no intention of selling the business, right? I mean, you were doing things were going well, you were, like, moving forward, and all of a sudden this thing happened, where, uh, you find yourself being part of a litigation and I mean, we don't need to get into the story, but it's like you really had no choice. It wasn't like th- something that you could have done differently. And you then followed your intuition of selling the business. Um, what was it like for you to really listen to your intuition? You know, and where did that come from? Like, how did you even hear that voice that say, "Hey, sell the business"?
that's a great question. So one, I will tell you that I am a woman of faith, right?
Mm,
And so I pray and I believe, in my higher power. I believe in God and Jesus. And so I prayed a lot during this time. And of course, I fought against what I knew I had to do, right?
mm,
So I prolonged it probably longer than
mm,
it needed to
mm.
be, but I knew in my spirit that that was the right decision. And, I spoke with, my husband. I talked to my husband about it. I talked to my mother about it. And it really was my mother who she said, what are you waiting for? You don't have any, you don't have any other choice. Like this is the best option, so you just have to do what you have to do.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I said, "Wow, okay," because I had her on the phone with the attorneys. Because I told the attorneys, I said, "Listen, I feel this is probably the best thing to do, but my mother was still impacted because she was still a partial owner of the
Right.
business." And I said, "Well, listen, let me get a call together, get my mom on, and let's just run through everything that we discussed, and we'll see what she says." And I thought her and I were going to have maybe some deeper conversation about it. We got off the phone. She said, I don't think you have any other option. You just have to do what you have to do and we'll figure it out.
Wow. So she gave you permission knowing how it would impact her, knowing that, they were the first generation owners, her and her, your dad. So, wow, that's a huge, blessing and support, and that she gave you there, right then and there.
Yeah, yeah. And that really was confirmation for me.
Mm,
Like, let's just let's just do it, and
mm.
we'll get through it. It's not the first hard thing that, I've encountered. I know that there's you get to the other side. And so I just pulled the trigger and went for it.
You're a very strong woman. Very strong and very courageous. So you did it, and then the grief period kicked in
Hmm.
because, for anybody who is a business owner, and it doesn't matter if it's big or like a small business, I always say my business, my lover, my child, my mom, my
Right.
dad, everything, so even though I'm a small
Right.
business. So talk about the grief period, and what did you do that helped you, get through it, and also, if you wouldn't mind talking about, because sometimes we do things that keep us stuck. If there were
Hmm.
things that you did that actually sort of had you go backwards, or kept you stuck from not moving through the period.
So one thing I started to do, and I started to do it consistently, was slow my mind down,
Mm,
meditate, breathe,
mm, mm,
read the Bible,
mm,
journal my thoughts, get my thoughts out, everything that I was feeling that I felt was kind of stuck,
mhm.
like in my chest, or just didn't feel good, I would write it out. And exercise, I've always exercised, but I was very intentional to make sure that I had this morning routine
Okay.
that helped me kind of process through what I was feeling. And also, I acknowledge that all these feelings were here. Because you run a business and you just got to keep going and do the things that you have to do. And so I pressed a lot of stuff down, right?
Okay.
But I had to acknowledge what I was feeling.
Mm,
And once I started to acknowledge, that's, I think, what helped me become unstuck. Like,
okay.
I'm acknowledging, I'm grieving. This is a loss. It hurts. It's painful, right? But this is part of the process. I don't have to stay here. And
Mhm.
the other thing is that I had to say, hey, I'm not a victim either. People
Oh.
go through things. People go through things, because I was really feeling sorry for myself. And then, when you talk to other people, they're like, oh, that's terrible. You should do this, you should do that. And I just said, I'm not a victim. This is happening to me, but it's also could be something that's happening for me. There could be
Mm,
something bigger, right, on the other side. And this is a process that I have to go through to get to that other side, you know. And
yeah.
feel like the door was closed for a reason, because there's a higher purpose, right?
Right.
I don't know what
Yeah.
it is even still today, but I do know that I think there's a higher purpose. And so how I became unstuck was really just acknowledging how I was feeling, because how I got through all the other obstacles that I faced was really just continuing to move forward, not really sitting with what I was feeling, because I didn't make time to deal with those feelings. But I became unstuck by dealing with the feelings and dealing with the emotions.
Good. That's it's a wonderful, that's wonderful advice for people because, we're busy and we think we don't have to deal with our feelings, and it's all transactional, and like there's always crises going on, and I have to act and I have to act and I have to make decisions.
Right.
We don't have time for the feelings, and then it's like a little pressure cooker, and they come out sideways, either with a housewife or whatever. So it's very, very important. So for those of you listening, acknowledge your feelings, especially when things are difficult, especially when you're going through a crisis, and especially when initially maybe have that feeling of like, oh, somebody is doing something to me and I feel like a victim. Very, very important. I remember, you and I talked about this, I come from four generation family business. And
Hmm.
when my dad went bankrupt and the state took over, and I laugh about it now, and,
Oh,
no, and no,
yeah.
nobody from the family was allowed to be involved. I wasn't even involved, and I felt sad about it, of what have happened and how 100 years of business just went down the drain. So I'm
Right.
sure there was a lot of grieving that you went through, and feeling of betrayal and all that kind of stuff. So good for you that you were able to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and it was challenging because in the past I struggled with showing vulnerability. It's you put the face on, you put and you do what you have to do, and so that was tough. So again, it took me. It was a process, and it's still a process even to today. I have to make a choice, right?
Mm. I
I
acknowledge
have to
you for
make a
coming
choice.
on and being
Yes,
vulnerable here on the in the
right,
podcast. Yay!
right. So yeah, and so it's about making a choice every day about how
Yeah.
I choose to show up, and if I want to continue to grow and evolve and
Mm,
get to the other side, then
mm,
I have to make the choice to acknowledge, and to heal and to allow myself to go through the process.
right. So what's different now? And then how long has it been since you sold the business? 3 years,
So
you said?
it'll actually be 2 years in May.
Oh,
Yeah.
2 years in May. So what's different now?
So now I feel a little lighter, right?
Ooh,
I mean,
just a
there was
little?
a little. I feel a little. So let me just say, there was a time when I would feel anxious if I drove past the McDonald's,
Oh,
right?
wow. Yeah, of
Because
course.
where I live, all pretty much most of the McDonald's that we owned would be in my travel path,
Oh
right?
my God, yes.
And so and
Oh my
so
God,
I would
yes.
feel anxious every time I drove past one. I would not go inside of one. I didn't want to
Wow.
see anybody that, had to do
Mm,
with McDonald's. Like I would see my, team members every now and then. We would get together. But other
mm,
than that, I would not I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk
mm,
to anybody.
mm.
I just didn't want to have any conversation,
Oh, of
right,
course.
about McDonald's. But so today though, it's
Mm,
not the same. I
mm.
can drive past and it's I'm fine. I've actually been around people that were operators and things like that in the past, and I'm fine. I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm comfortable where I'm at today.
Wonderful.
So yeah. So I would say that I'm in a good place, right? And continuing to move forward. Like I said, I'm not 100% where I want to be, but I feel like I'm in a good place, that I'm making progress.
How has this been a blessing?
I think the blessing is that I've been allowed to slow down, to sit with self, to really get to know more about me, more about my interests, more about my passions. I've just been doing random things. And if it brings me joy, I'll do more of it. If
Mm.
it
Like what?
doesn't, that's not
Like
it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like what are you willing to share? What are you exploring? What
So
brings you
I've
joy?
done so I've done some like interior decorating. That brings me
Mm.
joy. Just taking a blank canvas and being able to stage it and put it together. So I've done a few of those projects. Just doing a lot of reading, writing at some point, and you and I talked about this. I like to write a book. Um, my husband and I, we start taking pickleball lessons, right? So
Oh,
I
yes.
enjoy that. Yeah.
Pickleball.
So
Pickleball.
yeah. So just doing random things, taking classes, and seeing what I enjoy, what topics do I enjoy, right? And so I recently went through the certified exit planning class, and I learned a lot. I mean, I learned a lot just even in our own situation, my own family situation, of things we did have in place, but maybe things that could have been done better,
Mhm.
or didn't happen at all, that we should have had in place, right? And
Okay.
so that's something that I'm passionate about, really, just helping people exit in a way that they're in the best possible position that they can be, because that wasn't my story, right? And so I like to help people have a story that they can look back and say, I did the planning and I achieved the outcome that I would like to achieve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic because there's so many stories that we hear where it doesn't just go, the way people plan.
Right. Right.
So pickleball, doing some interior decorating, design, and slowing down, and it sounds like smelling the roses along the way.
Yeah, so funny story. After I
Okay.
sold, so we stay in Mount Washington, so it's on the top of the hill. Great views,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so it was probably like a couple days after I sold the restaurants. I said I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to start getting outside, walking in nature. So I walked down Grandview, which is the main road through Mount Washington, where you get the views. And I'm like, oh, people are out here just walking, sitting on the benches, drinking coffee.
Yeah.
I see people out in these little restaurants. And so I was like, wow. And so I come back home and I tell my husband, I'm like, oh my goodness. I said, people are just out and about, walking around, sitting on the benches, reading books, drinking coffee. I even walked past a coffee shop. I never even knew that coffee shop was there. He said, I've been telling you this the whole time we've been living here.
And you're like, thanks, honey. My
I'm
mind
like,
was
oh, well, today.
like my mind was on something else. And like, wow.
Yeah.
So you go now for coffee there? You meet up there?
Sometimes I just walk up, just walk down and walk. There's a main road that has like little coffee shops and restaurants and things like that. It's called Shiloh, and so
Mm.
sometimes I'll walk down that street and just kind of just be present.
So nice.
Yeah,
So, I always think if we could only know what we know later while we are business owners. I've been coaching people for 30 some years, and sometimes people are so wrapped up in the no, but I have to get it done. I have to work all those 12 hours to, and like you would be more effective if you took some breaks. You would be more effective and make better decisions if you just slow down and, and had a cup of coffee. It's so difficult for us to integrate, those very high powered sort of functioning way of being with the okay, let's slow down and completely disconnect. That I'm glad you are experiencing that now. So
yeah, because I'll tell you that at some point I'll probably purchase another business or something like that because that's just what I like to do.
mhm,
But I will approach it differently, right? Because to your point, if you don't take the time to just experience life and be present, especially present with those that you love, your family, your spouse, your friends, or even explore passions. So if it's pickleball, if it's golf, or whatever it is, if you don't take the time to really just experience joy, then you're just going to miss it. You'll miss everything,
mhm. And
and
yeah, right.
and
We
so
yeah.
yeah, and so I would say have like a joy plan, right? Like what brings me joy.
Mm. What brings me joy? Exactly.
Yeah,
What is that? So listen, everybody. What brings you joy? So just get that list out, and start brainstorming with yourself. What actually brings me joy? Not just things that you think should bring you joy, but put yourself in different positions of where you can explore. Does that bring me joy? Doesn't bring me joy? Oh, I like this. I don't like this. And I always say, if there weren't people, if it wouldn't be for people, we wouldn't need all this stuff. It's like, why are there restaurants? Because of the people. So
right,
I think having joy in your life and experiencing love is one of the most profound things that we can actually experience as a human being.
right, right. That love and that connection and just that overall sense of just well-being, like you feel good, right? And so if it makes me feel good, I want more of that. And if I have more of that, then I'm a better person. Like I show up as a better leader, as a better wife, a better mother, a better in every relationship that I'm in, I'm better,
Hmm. Yeah,
you
and
know.
you pass that on to other generations. How many grandkids do you have?
I have four.
You have
Yeah.
4?
I have four. So I have four
Wow.
by my son, but then my daughter's married and her wife has three kids. So
Wow.
technically, I'll say I have six grandkids. or
Wow,
seven,
yeah.
seven.
7,
Yeah,
7.
seven.
No,
Yeah,
definitely. Not just technically, definitely have 7 grandkids.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
enjoy them, I would presume.
I do. So, my son's kids, the oldest is 13, so she's getting ready to go to high school. So, can you
Wow!
believe that?
The
Yes.
baby
So
is
the
13. I don't
baby.
believe it.
So she's
Oh my
getting
god.
ready to go to high school. And so that's been an experience, just watching her grow and evolve. And she's like, oh, Mimi, that's what they call me, Mimi. I'm getting ready to go to high school. Can you believe that? Time just goes so fast. And so it's interesting just having those conversations with her about how time does go so fast. And it's important that you make the right decisions now, right? Because time goes very quickly. And before you know it, you'll be in college and then and then I have a grandson, he's 11, 2 9-year-old girls. And then on my daughter's side, I have a 27, 24, and 21-year-old.
Oh, big
Yeah,
kids.
I have the gamut. Yeah, adult children.
Adult children. Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. So
yeah,
that's yeah.
yeah,
So that's a lot of joy there that you get to experience and share.
yeah, and they keep me busy. Keep me busy.
It's good. So we're about to wrap it up. Is there, something that you want to share? Maybe some nuggets or that you want to leave with the audience. That you feel like has made a big impact in your life, or whatever comes to mind.
You know, I would say that we all will experience different challenges and obstacles and roadblocks in life. But as long as you're still alive, you still have breath in your body, that's not the end of your story, right? You can write a new chapter, right? You can turn a new page and you just put one foot in front of the other and just keep moving. And a new path will be revealed, right? Um, just through my own experience, I know that to be true. And so just keep moving forward.
One little tiny step in front of the other, even
Yeah.
if you're crawling or you're shoving yourself or you're crying, and movement is everything. And sometimes we just need to trust that whatever is going to be at the end or what's going to be part of the journey will be exactly what we were hoping for or wanting for or ready for.
Or even bigger than we could even imagine.
Bigger than we could even imagine.
Right.
Amen.
That's right.
Like, I'm totally with you. It's like, I don't, I mean, I don't think I would ever imagine that at my age I would be living in Israel with 2 little kids, but that's what, was meant for me. And you're on your way to finding out what's your next big thing is going to be. So that's exciting.
Right. Right. So it's like you never know. So every day is an adventure, you know?
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And, I'm sure we'll be following each other's journeys. And
Right.
I'm excited to see what's next for you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show. It's really been an experience, right? And
Yes.
I wish, yeah, and I wish you well. I'm happy you're back home and
Thank
hopefully
you.
settled. Yeah,
Thank you. Yes,
yeah,
everything is very good. Thank you so much.
yeah.
Okay. Bye bye for now.
Bye.